Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Stern, CEO of Weitzman Canada. I want to welcome you all to our webinar featuring what I know will be a compelling conversation with Professor Brian Berkowitz from the Weitzman Institute of Science. For the next hour, we'll take you on a journey of emotions, ending, I hope, with pride, inspiration, and determination. Let's start with some pride. Brian is a fellow Canadian born in Edmonton. Now, gratitude. We have a big group here today joining us from across the country. Thank you all for making the time to be with us. A special wave to guests attending our viewing party in Vancouver, bright and early at 7:30 a.m. Thank you. Brian is in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at the Institute, and he's a dear friend of ours at Weitzman Canada. I always look forward to hearing him speak about his curiosity and how it has led him to explore many different branches of science, a true testament to the DNA and spirit of Weitzman and its rock star scientists. We're especially grateful to Brian for sharing his time right now, because the last 2.5 months, as you can imagine, have been exceptionally hard for the Weitzman Institute. As I'm sure you know, on June 15th, 2 ballistic missiles struck the campus in Rehovot. Thankfully, there were no injuries, and we are so grateful for that. Unfortunately, 5 buildings were severely damaged, and 50 other buildings sustained collateral damage. 5,000 pieces of equipment were destroyed, as well as more than 50 labs. Brian's lab was among them. We'll hear soon how he's doing and how his science will progress. There's that determination. In the aftermath of the attack, the Weitzman communities in Israel and all around the world experienced profound shock and grief. They are now grappling with the staggering costs of recovery. Rebuilding science will take hundreds of millions of dollars. However, as members of our Weitzman community, it won't surprise you to hear about the amazing acts of generosity in the wake of the disaster. It's incredibly moving. The resilience on display is extraordinary. The science will move forward. We believe the future will be even brighter, bolstered by the continued support of our community in Canada and around the world as we rebuild science together. I'd like to share a short video with you now that captures that range of emotions and gives you a sense of the scale of the attack on science. Oh, I told you there would be a lot of emotion. I stand here as Weitzman's CEO, but I represent 18 incredible women across the country who stand with me, pulling together the community of Weitzman Canada in support. One of those rock star women is right here with me, Cindy Sherwin. Many of us welcomed Cindy into our homes on CTV News for decades. She is our Director of External Relations here at Weitzman Canada, and she was a journalist at CTV News for nearly 3 decades. Cindy, over to you.
Susan, thank you so much. Hi to everyone. Before we begin, and as Susan said, as we absorb all the images that we just saw, just a little bit of business to get out of the way. I want to invite everyone to submit questions for Brian at any time during the webinars. We'll have a Q&A session immediately following our chat. So they could be questions about his research, about rebuilding his lab, about the Institute, anything you would like to know more about. All you will have to do is type the question into a chat box that you can find at the bottom of your screen, and we will get to as many questions as we can. And for those that we can't answer, we promise we are going to get in touch in the days following with those answers. As a former health and medical reporter, I wanted to say that this is the best perk of my new life here at Weitzman Canada, talking with the scientists, my happy place, and not just any scientist, Professor Brian Berkowitz. And before we speak to him, I want to give you a sense of his accomplishments, who he is. Brian is the incumbent of the Sam Zuckerberg Professorial Chair in Hydrology in the Department of Earth and Planetary Science, as Susan mentioned. It's a department he once headed after joining Weitzman in 1993, although it had a different name back then. He was born in Edmonton, and Brian got degrees in applied mathematics in Alberta, among others. And at one time, he worked as a research hydrologist for Israel's Ministry of Agriculture before joining Weitzman. Brian studies how water and chemicals move through the ground, especially in soil and underground water systems. But more recently, his research has expanded into medical science, a foray into urology and the treatment of kidney stones for a very personal family reason, lymphedema, including the development of new biomedical devices to improve patients' lives, and also applied that to the field of gastroenterology. Brian has received numerous awards and honors, most recently the John Dalton Medal of the European Geosciences Union, that tripped me up, which is given to researchers who have made outstanding scientific contributions to the understanding of the Earth's water cycle. And it was said that his discoveries inspire generations of scientists. He is married, a father of 3, and I was fascinated to learn that he's an accomplished musician who played the bassoon professionally with the Edmonton Symphony. Brian, it is great to talk to you. Welcome.
Thanks very much.
I don't know how you found time in all your years to do any of that, or all of that. I wanted to start by asking you where we find you this afternoon, because it's late afternoon in Israel. Are you at home? Or are you at
Well, I normally say it's a pleasure to be here, but being here now means I'm in my office still. So my days since 2.5, actually almost 3 months ago, since the missiles hit, I'm usually in the office by 7 o'clock in the morning, and very often here, much to the chagrin of my wife and family, the rest of the family here, very often 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, I'm still here trying to put things together again.
Well, we'll delve into your science in just a moment in great detail, but first, June 15th, we met last week for the first time, and you described yourself as an optimist, and more than that, in the days that followed, and I did some reading about you, you express a lot of gratitude for life, which is extraordinary and wonderful, a wonderful quality. But still, of course, what happened at Weitzman is truly harrowing. I think it's hard for all of us here in Canada to completely grasp the magnitude, even though we just saw those images. So I wondered if you would be so kind as to share with us how you learned what happened. Where were you when the campus was hit? I don't know if you live on campus or away. Take us through some of that.
So we live just off campus, across the street, actually. So it's very, very close, just off campus. This was the attack was the second night of the war, actually. So what happened is the Friday night already, one of our daughters with her husband and 3 very young children were all staying with us because we have the bomb shelter in a better position than where they were. So they just moved in with us. So Saturday night, the 3 kids were already sleeping in the bomb shelter. We knew that way we didn't have to move them. The alarms went off about 2:45 in the morning. By 3 o'clock or so, we're all in the morning, and we heard 2, well, actually 3. There was a third missile that hit outside the Weizmann Institute. It hit the market area in Rehovot. So we heard 3 incredibly loud, incredibly powerful explosions. Our building, we're in a 6-story building, we're on the top floor. And unlike an earthquake where you feel kind of a shake, the building was actually moving back and forth like this. A very strange feeling. Fortunately, there was no damage to our building. We heard the explosions. You have to wait 10 minutes till we got the permission to leave the room. I went running out to one of our balconies, which has a direct view of the Institute, and there was already then 2 massive plumes of smoke and obviously flames coming out. So I knew at that point we'd been hit. I had no idea my offices were gone. So basically, with all the emergency crews and the ground children there and all, I stayed put. The usual things, not to go to the scene of the crime or accident. Anyway, so the next morning already I was there, and the pictures that you saw in the short movie, some of those pictures were in fact my labs in my building. So the damage, it's very difficult to explain the feeling you have. In fact, a few days later, I brought my wife onto campus to see, and it doesn't matter how many pictures you see, it's much more massive. The the blast damage, the shockwave damage from the 2 explosions is so incredible. It knocks out heavy windows, heavy rock pieces from the walls. I had chunks of glass stuck in the walls outside my office. I couldn't even get into my office, by the way. It was so badly damaged. What I was able to salvage from there afterwards, from the various awards you mentioned, all the certificates were of course broken. I received a beautiful silver cup for one of the awards, and I managed to rescue it. It had fallen under anything. Under all the shelving. The only way to describe it was, you're familiar with the clock, the melting clock of Salvador Dali?
Yes.
Okay, that's what my silver cup now looks like.
Oh, goodness.
So when I get set up here in the office, it's going to sit on a shelf as is, as a reminder of what we went through.
Yeah.
So anyway, we spent, just to if you want more than the detail.
Yes.
So the immediate panic was, we have in my lab a sample of over 1,000 samples of biobank of amniotic fluid. This is a project we got involved in about 4 years ago. We've been slowly, painstakingly collecting, with of course Helsinki approval and all, samples of amniotic fluid, which we're now analyzing for chemical content. We've in fact published one paper, just to give you an idea where this goes, and the connection with environmental science is we found a connection between rubidium in the amniotic fluid, which is found in coffee, nuts, and various other materials, a connection between rubidium concentration and birth weight. So whether we can use this as a diagnostic tool afterwards, we're trying to move ahead on that. All of these samples were frozen. They have to remain frozen. So like many others, there's a panic the next morning in all of the biology buildings, all the molecular samples, biological samples. We had to get our samples in. There's a major move. The Institute did a phenomenal job that morning of bringing in at least 200, if I'm not mistaken, freezers. They grabbed them from everywhere. They were thrown into cafeterias, into underground parking lots, wherever they could get generators and electrical plugs. And we were busy frantically stuffing everything into the freezers.
But
So,
I understand there was a piece of equipment though that's used to analyze or those samples that did not make it.
So that's $1 million piece of equipment that we used to sample now. It was in the Ullman building, which was totally destroyed, absolute total loss. So we've ordered already another machine. And again, the Institute, if I jump ahead, has been phenomenal. And already they've been giving us blank checks to order things as needed. I don't know how it's going to be paid for, but they've given the blank checks.
Okay, well, that's great news. And also I know you were on your hands and knees.
Yes. Yeah.
It must, I mean, emotionally, that must have been, I can't quite imagine what that was like.
I guess whenever you get bad news, it's a combination of emotions. You feel completely heartbroken. What other emotions are? There's anger, there's rage. There's a feeling of helplessness. Some of my colleagues just said, okay, that's it, I'm leaving, giving up. And everybody else then, I'm just trying to go back to the period then. It was very emotional. Basically, I guess I'd say people supported each other. In my own case, we had to get first into the labs to make sure there were no toxic chemicals that had been released. I spent the days afterwards literally in hazmat outfits and all, but with the hard hat on. We still had all the water been turned off. There was no electricity, but there was glass and everything hanging down from all the labs. So we had to be in hard hats. And I was literally going through the floor of the lab trying to find whatever could be salvaged. Okay.
Astonishing. Yeah.
And
So
you pick things out, and nobody knew what to do, and things were dangerous, and there were puddles of water everywhere. So there was no electricity. The smell was horrendous. This was 40-degree heat, of course, the summer with high humidity, trying to figure out what could we salvage. And we spent about a month and a half just doing that.
So we're going to speak a lot more later about rebuilding your lab. I know you have made some progress,
Yes.
but there's a lot left to do. We'll talk about what's needed. So you know what? Let's move into now to talk about what it's all needed for,
Okay.
which is everything that's swirling around in your brain, your ideas and your aspirations. But let's go back first. I think we'd all benefit from hearing a little bit of your science origin story, because the breadth of your interests is amazing. In some ways, we were joking fluids and how they flow, but that's quite literal. And you started with water and oil. I'm curious to know what you wanted to learn, and then tell us, in brief, where that led you.
What I wanted to learn is, I think my earliest memories was asking my parents. The question was why. Everything I wanted to know why. So that goes way back. After I came to Weitzman, I'll start from there basically. I didn't intend to do water or hydrology. I knew nothing about it. It's like you fall into these different projects. By the way, it's the same way I ended up playing the bassoon in school, because I went to the band program the first day and the teacher said, "What instrument do you want?" And everyone wanted the clarinet and the trumpet and the flute. And I said, "I don't know." She says, "Bassoon, you'll take it." Because nobody wanted to take the instrument, so they threw it at me. So I kind of ended up in hydrology that way. But I very, very quickly, like the bassoon, fell in love with what I was doing. People take water for granted and how fluids move underground. I'll just give an example. What underground looks like is this. Okay, it's not open caverns, it's rock, it's soil. This is, in this particular case, I hope you can see it. It's about 30% porosity. In other words, in this chunk of rock, about a third of it is actually air or could be filled with water or oil. Okay, this is natural chunk of rock. So you start saying, hey, this is really neat. It's heterogeneous. How do fluids move through it? I was originally taken by the mathematics of the equations of how you can describe how fluids move. And by the time I got to the Institute, I realized that we had all these lovely equations and there was no proof for anything. So I decided to go into the laboratory and started playing around and said, hey, this is fun. And I now do both. So I went from hydrology and things continued.
And one of your and it links to contamination, right? I mean, and to the environment, which is something we're all so aware of. So all kinds of pollutants, and you're also looking at how best to attack that problem.
Yeah. So again, you just somebody asked me, by the way, how I do the different projects, and it's like having kids. You have your first child, and you say, "I love the child so much. How could I love another one?" And the next one comes along, and the next one, your heart just gets bigger. It's not that you have, it just goes bigger. So the main thing was, how do fluids move through this chunk of rock? Okay, it's not easy. Then when you have contaminants, if you have a spill of contaminants, intentional, unintentional, how do they move through here? And then you get chemical reactions occurring as well. So you get these very irregular plumes of contaminants that are moving through. Going back from the 1950s, it was pesticides, things like DDT. Then you get to other chemicals, then heavy metals. Everybody knows about mercury and lead poisoning, for example. Then over the years, we've gotten to other pharmaceutical products. There are huge amounts. Basically, name the pharmaceutical compound, and it's in the water supply in some concentration. Then we moved to nanoparticles. Now we've been moving with other, what are called technology critical elements. These are elements that are used in mobile phones and hybrid cars and other high-tech equipment that nobody knows anything about their geochemistry and how they behave. And just to give an idea of the importance of this, general drinking water quality regulations allow 4 parts per billion concentration. For example, of an organic material, of oil, or of lead, 4 parts per billion. 4 parts per billion is the equivalent of 8 grains of sand in in 1 ton of peanut butter, to give it a measure. Okay, so take 1 ton of peanut butter, make it crunchy peanut butter to make it interesting, put in 8 grains of sand. If that were mercury, that would be considered toxic. We're now working with PFAS materials in the water supply, and these are in firefighting foams, in Gore-Tex, and in Teflon. And in fact, if you check the blood content or the content of PFAS materials in everybody's blood, about 99% of us around the world have elevated PFAS concentrations. And those are considered toxic at the part per trillion levels. In other words, 8 grains of sand in 1,000 tons of peanut butter is now considered toxic. So the studies we do are how do these things move and react through soils and rock. And then on the other hand, I got involved in chemical means to treat the water and make it drinkable again. And we're working in that direction too.
And so then you lent your expertise to another area that became very, very personal for you. And
Yes.
that it was the motivation. It took you into the field of urology. So suddenly you were a hydrologist going to urology conferences, I gather. And you know, and it's because your son Yotam developed a medical problem. You realized that fluid dynamics, all that knowledge might be able to help him. And also as a father, you were determined to help your son. So what happened to you?
So what happened is now, I guess about 8 years ago, he had an attack of kidney stones, and they removed the usual way you do insert a laser, fragment the stones, and then remove the fragments that are left behind. One fragment was left behind. They couldn't catch it and remove it. And he was in the less than 0.5% of the population that suffer from this. So it's relatively rare, but the stone eventually went down to the ureter and got stuck. Just to explain, you have the kidney, you have a very, very narrow tube called the ureter, which then drains into the bladder. And the ureter is only about 3 millimeters. It's very, very narrow. By the way, it's really bad hydraulic engineering. And as I say, when the time comes to meet my maker, I've got some things to say about the hydrological system, the urological system. It's not good planning. Anyway, the stone got stuck in a section of the ureter. It was finally removed, but because of scarring, it did damage and the ureter closed.
And it's incredibly painful.
Which is incredibly painful. Anybody who's had kidney stones, 10% of the population will sometime in their life suffer from kidney stones. 5% will have recurring kidney stones. Okay, and these things are incredibly painful to pass, even if they're only 3 or 4 millimeters. Larger than that, they generally can't be passed, and you have to remove them surgically. So there were 2 problems. In his case, as I say, the ureter was closed 7-8 years ago. At the time, it was not operable. There's now a robotic technique that's been developed that is treatable. At the time, there was no treatment. So they tried various balloon dilations to open the ureter. It didn't work. I was at a conference in Boston at the time. Melanie, my wife, phones me, giving me a note saying they tried for the 3rd time. It failed. There's nothing they can do. They want to remove his kidney. Sorry. My response to that was a series of 4-letter words that I won't use now. And I argued with the doctors about that. I left the conference, went back to the hotel room, and over about 12 hours, I did a search. In that time, came up with an experimental stent, and I said, this is going to work. I phoned Melanie right away. She got in touch with the company, and then I spent about 3 weeks or so arguing with the doctors. They said, it's never going to work. It's experimental. One story there, one doctor says, who we've now become best friends and colleagues, he says, look, I'm a doctor. I only want to do a treatment that's been done 1,000 times before that I know it'll work. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a scientist. I want to be the first one to do it, not the 1,000th one. That's the difference.
Yes, I read that quote that later he said, if it's the same gentleman, that, you know, doctors repeat things. They learn from the past and then they keep doing them, and they may not have the time to innovate. And you are at the other end of the spectrum, innovating. Yeah.
So I devoured the literature and realized that in some areas they were very much in the dark ages. I did some calculations, explained to them why the stent was going to work, why the treatment would work, and they said, no, it's just an equation. To which I responded, just equations put a man on the moon, right? So I built a system in the laboratory, and you make an artificial kidney and systems like that. I played with stents, built a system, showed them it was going to work. The doctors, to their credit, and that is to their credit, said, you know what, let's try it. We inserted the stent in your thumb. Year and a half later, it was removed. He's fine. His kidney's fine.
Incredible.
In the course of doing that, I then got involved in all kinds of other research activities. And as a result, I've published, I don't know, a dozen and a half papers or so already. One received the award as the Outstanding Research in Urology by the Israeli Association of Urologists, which I have to say that was fun because we go up on stage. My colleague is Director of Endourology, Kaplan Medical Center, and then has my name, says Weizmann Institute, Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences, which made it fun.
Yes. And what was their reaction? The doctors who spoke to you must have just howled at that. They must have.
It was open. They were very good. I had to basically, the first time I was there, they said, "Who is this guy?" And then they realized I'm coming out of left field. But I was able to tell them many times, with all due respect, you're wrong. You don't know how to. You're not conceiving of the fluid dynamics correctly. And so the connection, I'll just say, is between, if this is a rock and this leads into everything, this is a porous medium. Okay. So if you look at bone, this isn't bone, this is another kind of rock, but this looks like bone, right? It's also another kind of porous medium. Bone, a sponge, is a porous medium. Okay, diapers, I had one and I decided not to show it. So a diaper is a porous medium. And now look at tissue. This is a porous medium, right? It's flexible, but it's just a porous medium and not really very different than this chunk of rock. It's the same equations, the same dynamics, and that's what I've transferred. Yeah. So we go from there.
So you're showing us how a scientist's brain works, how
Well, how my brain works. Some scientists are very much like this. They keep going in one direction, and I'm a little bit more
curious. You're very curious.
I like to do new things.
Yeah, but you make associations and you see things in nature and you align them with the body. You see that compatibility and that mirroring, and it's fascinating that you do that. And another project that you're involved with that I think is really interesting for a few reasons. First, it showcases the whole BINA Innovation Hub at the Weizmann Institute. I'm talking about the lymphedema work, which, you'll correct me, but it brings scientists together, right, to research whether this idea has legs and it sort of nurtures it and whether it could lead to new technology. And you collaborated with the director of the Department of Plastic Surgery, a director, in an attempt to find an innovative approach for treating lymphedema. So maybe tell us a little bit about what lymphedema is and what problem were you trying to solve? It has to do with lymphatic fluid, correct?
Lymphatic fluid, right. So I knew nothing about the field, but it sounded interesting. And the Shamir Medical Center, a Safra Fay hospital, had approached YEDA, which is our tech transfer unit, and said, we want to get involved in innovation. We only have one patent from 2005 that was abandoned. We'd like to get involved because we're doing neat work too. So they held a day where they talked about the different projects they were interested in. One that came out was lymphedema. YEDA decided this was one they wanted to pursue because there's a potentially huge market. There are, just in the United States alone, 10 million people suffering from lymphedema. So it's a huge population. And so the person at YEDA said, well, Brian's been doing fluid dynamics and did well with urology. Let's throw it at him. So they sent me the basic information. And I have to say, I wasn't prepared because they sent me a PowerPoint file. They said, here, read the PowerPoint file. I get home that evening, make a sandwich, I sit down, open the PowerPoint file, and there was no, there's what's it called, a trigger warning. Oh. So I open the first slide and I see a picture and I just about spit out my sandwich. So
maybe tell us what it is.
What is lymphedema? Basically, what happened is you have the blood system. Everybody knows about the circulatory system. You have a similar lymphatic system. And the way it works is fluid has to be drained from between the cells. And you also bring white blood cells for a state of infection. There are a whole number of roles of the lymphatic system. But a key one is to drain additional fluid between the cells. Okay? So what happens, it's controlled, basically the regulators are in the, just in the shoulder area, in the armpit for the arms, and in the groin area on either side for the legs. Those are the main areas where the lymph nodes are. So whether it's because of breast cancer, other kinds of cancer, injuries, other treatments, if the lymph nodes in that area are removed or not functioning, there's no way to functionally remove the fluid from the arm or from the leg. Especially in the legs, because of gravity and sitting down, the leg can grow in third, fourth stage. You can grow to be like an elephant. There's no
And
other word
I've
for it.
interviewed people with this condition, and it can be absolutely debilitating and
Yes.
painful
Yeah.
and terrible.
Yes. You get to the point you can't move because the weight of the leg is so incredible. So I'm starting to look at this and said, okay, well, again, tissue, you have buildup of fluid. Buildup of fluid in a tissue goes back to this. So it struck me the same evening. I'm looking at this and I said, well, this is actually easy to solve. I know how I extract fluid from a porous medium, from soils. I actually went and took from my own laboratory. In fact, I can't show them because it's all proprietary, but some instruments we used to extract water from there. Started playing with it in foam and showed it's going to work. Took it back. Then I met Lior Heller, Professor Heller, who's the head of plastic surgery, as you said, at the hospital. Explained it to him, and I met with the panel there. He said, well, it sounds interesting, but it's never going to work. I said, yes, it will. And I explained to them again. I didn't pull out equations, but I explained principles. And I sat there with a few, well, you see, I like to use demonstrations. So I had some pieces of foam and a tube of water coming out. And I said, look, just the easiest way to explain it, if this is your whole arm, if I put, and it's saturated with water, if I pull fluid from here, it's also going to be pulled from here, right? You're going to pull fluid from everywhere. It's not that I pulled fluid from here and it only is removed from here. It's a sponge. It'll move all the way through and be removed. So they said, well, so I built a system in the lab, I took it to the hospital. I schlepped it to the hospital, a simple little, so here, look. And they were intrigued. And then from there, bottom line is we moved ahead and we actually received compassionate use permission from Ministry of Health in Helsinki, and we did a first in human test on a patient whose legs were absolutely enormous. He weighed 200 kilos, just to give an idea. And we did an initial test over a 24-hour period, and it worked beautifully. So from there, Binal was happy, everybody was happy, and in fact, we signed a license agreement with a startup company just last week. They've already raised the first $500,000 million to move ahead. They're looking for more funding, and we want to move to full production and clinical testing, all being well.
It must be so gratifying. These are world solutions. They solve real world problems for people, and that must be very gratifying. I know that if we continue our tour around the body, this you haven't published, you mentioned to me yet.
No.
You're still working on it, but am I right? You told me that you actually experimented in your kitchen here. Melanie lent you some supplies, lent you a hand in your own kitchen. But so this is in the field of gastroenterology.
Gastroenterology. So we had another project with Sheba that was on the amniotic fluid. So again, the group in pediatric gastroenterology, I forget how somebody knew somebody who knew somebody else who mentioned something to somebody yet, and they said, well, Brian's involved in medical. So they contacted me and said, there's a major problem with what are called PEG tubes. These are the feeding tubes in children and in adults. Anytime that for whatever reason people can't swallow, they can't take food through the stomach, a button or a small hole is put into the abdomen itself. Okay, these are well-known PEG tube feeding tubes. They're very effective. The problem is the initial tube to establish the initial channel for the feeding from the stomach to through the abdominal wall. You have to go through the mouth under general anesthetic. You insert not a very nice looking contraption that goes in. It pulls under pressure over about a 2-month, 3-month period until you have basically a scar tissue that leaves an open channel from the stomach to the outside. That's then removed, and that's the problem. How do you remove it without causing damage? Once it's removed, then you can use simple little balloon and little buttons and everything else. They're very effective and they work very well. The problem is when you remove that initial anchor that created the channel, causes a whole host of problems. So they said, do you have any ideas of how we could improve that? So this was in the morning. I said, well, I need to see an example of existing tubes. So they put half a dozen of them in a cab, sent them to me. I got them at 3 o'clock. And they said, this is urgent. We really want to move ahead on this. They brought them to me by taxi at 3 o'clock. I looked in the office for a few minutes and played with them, and then went home and said, I have to understand what's going on. And sitting with, I don't know, that was the muses struck me again. And 2 or 3 hours later, I said, oh, I know how to do this. Melanie was there. I said, listen, I need to play with things. We need some sugar. We need some sugar cubes. We need to play with little artificial sweetener. What do you have in the way of granulated salt? What else do you have? So Melanie's pulling out all these baking goods and everything else and laughing at me. By the way, not laughing at me, laughing with me.
Right. Of
We've
course.
been together, how many years? It's been 40, my gosh, 43 years already. So I should mention, by the way, on some of the previous patents in the endourology, I've got 3 or 4 patents there. Melanie also helped me build the prototypes for those, sewing things and putting things together and say, what can I use for this material and that? So she's my resource person. Anyway, so we're playing at the kitchen table. Sure enough, I had a little proof of concept that evening, and we ran from there. And that already we've submitted a patent that looks very positive. We got to get additional funding now from the government, from the Innovation Authority, and we're already building the first real prototypes. In fact, I had a meeting on that 2 hours ago. We're building the first prototypes, and we'll do animal testing in the next few months.
Wow.
If
So
it
all
works,
this,
again, the implications are wonderful.
yeah. And all this makes me reflect on everything I keep hearing about Weitzman, about the Institute, that there isn't an agenda, that this is the beauty of what you get there, of the support you receive at the Institute that differs from so many other academic institutions. If you're inspired, if you have that, what we call a blue sky idea, if you're transfixed by something you want to pursue, that you are able to do that.
Yes,
Do you
absolutely.
see it that way too?
Absolutely. In fact, we had a departmental review last year, and there were people from Princeton, Caltech, and Stanford that were the sort of examiners. And I told them about the number of things I'm doing, and they said, well, how did you get into all this? I explained to them. They said, well, why are you doing it? I said, because it's science. I'm interested in science. And they said, they never fund us on that. So the fellows in Caltech or Stanford, they're hydrologists. They're supposed to do that. We'll fund your work in that. But God forbid you should do anything else.
Right. You have to
And
stay in your
here,
lane.
this is a playground. Just imagine what's written behind you: renew and ignite, and that's what we do.
That's remarkable. So on that note, I'd love to get to some questions, and some were passed on to me. So we do have a good, I think, 8-10 minutes. So I think the first one I want to ask you here is, we'll go back to your lab. That, of course, is what we're focusing on and thinking about today. What has been the most meaningful source of support you've received since the attack?
Since the attack, knowing that, first of all, colleagues from all over the country and many colleagues from around the world offered support. Whether I've got a very close friend, too, in Germany, said, come here for 3 months and run your experiments here. We'll give you all the equipment you need. Of course, I didn't do that, but a German foundation, by the way, has just said they're trying to arrange 100,000 euros to be transferred to me to help out. Okay, completely unsolicited and as a surprise. And then just the support from around the world, from friends and family and colleagues and friends of friends and friends of family, all saying, how can we help? And the biggest support then has been from within the Institute itself. Just to give you an idea, I lost from my own lab probably about $1.5 million worth of equipment. These are workhorses that I need the equipment. Now, something good has come out of this, because I had 3 large pieces of equipment. They were each 10 years old. Workhorses worked beautifully, totally destroyed. So I said, I need this equipment. We looked in the last 10 years, a company has now produced with miniaturization a single machine that does what all 3 machines did. The price is lower. They said, we want to help the Weitzman Institute, gave us a 40% discount on an incredibly expensive machine. And I went to, the same day we realized what we needed, and this was the equipment, spoke to the dean and to the vice president, and it got to the president. That was in the morning. 5 o'clock that afternoon, the Institute said, go ahead and order it. Here's the budget number. Okay, I think you're on mute, Sydney, or okay.
Nope.
Oh, no, sorry. Anyway, so they said, go ahead and order it. Incredible. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they said, don't worry about where it's coming from. We'll handle that. Order the equipment, get to work.
So that is the greatest need now. It's equipment. I mean, I know that you lost, of course, research
Yes.
that you will hopefully make up for in time, in part.
Most of it at least, yes.
Good. So were there any projects or experiments that were particularly advanced or close to fruition or breakthroughs that had to be arrested because of that?
The instrument, as I say, where we're measuring the amniotic fluid, and
Yeah.
we'd love to move ahead. We have actually a grant on that to move ahead on that. So we've lost the equipment. So there's now a delay of easily a year until the machine has been ordered and calibrated. And first of all, till the lab is found for it, and then it's calibrated. These are very, very sensitive pieces of equipment. So that's on hold for a year. So you contact the funding agency and say, please hold, extenuating circumstances, and they've been fine with that.
But that what you just highlight too is the urgency of
Yes.
all this. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
It takes time to build, but we can't wait because
Exactly.
without that lab, without that building, you just can't move forward, right?
So what we're doing, for example, is other groups have been doing experimentation or measurements in other labs. I couldn't go. I've now gone 3 months without doing real science. I wrote several papers, did revisions on papers, student theses, but not what I call new science. I actually 2 weeks ago, and then last week, we were in the operating room of Kaplan Hospital to do another experiment there because they had the equipment I needed. I schlepped stuff over from my lab, whatever I'd saved, and we ran the experiments there. And we actually did new science. And I know it may be hard for non-scientists to understand, but it's a playground. I mean, you get such a high. You don't need drugs. You just do an experiment and say, my God, look at the result we found. And you get excited. And so you can't wait. And so right now, people are going around. Maybe I'll just digress for a moment. People keep saying, oh, you must be so depressed and so this and so that. And I said, I've got nothing to complain about. Nobody was killed. Nobody was injured. If I had to choose between the loss of my house and the loss of my lab, I'll take the loss of the lab any day. And then I've got nothing to complain about when we've got 48 hostages that are still in underground tunnels and the suffering going on. I've got nothing to complain about. We build, we move ahead. And again, with the equipment, and I've got some ideas, but one other quick note. I built another system for urology to make some really neat clinical measurements. That was destroyed completely. So Melanie saw me one night. It took me 4 attempts to rebuild or re-sketch the system. I actually came up with a better system, much more elegant. So, sometimes there's benefit in say, okay, tear it apart, redo it, and we'll do it better.
And I guess though, that's true perhaps of someone who has your foundation. I would imagine though, for graduate students, you have brilliant young people come to you.
Yeah.
They can't just sit on their hands, right? I mean, that's another reason to get this going. You don't want to lose these great brains, right?
The institute again was fantastic. They had psychologists and sociologists for anybody who needed any kind of counseling. The first few days, aside from crawling around on my hands and knees on the lab floors, I spent it with my group. I was in daily contact. We have, of course, a WhatsApp group, not a chat group with my own students. Every day I was in touch with them, spoke to each one individually. There were at the time 8 people in the group, spoke to each one individually every day. They all had, background literature searches to complete or other homework still from other exams. So everybody had what to do. And the job was to keep people optimistic and keep them motivated. And I promised them, I said, as fast as you can, we'll have the lab up and running. And as of last Thursday, I had to rebuild the lab from scratch. I inherited a lab built in 1953. So we replaced the lead piping. The fume hoods were non-functional. All the electricity was non-functional. I stripped down the lab and rebuilt it in less than 6 weeks, which is unheard of. And I was here, as I say, every day doing things myself. But the lab is now up and running.
It's amazing. So what I'm hearing is there's been tremendous progress, support, but the needs are still great. So
Very much so. There's so much that we're missing still, and there's also, it's not just equipment; it's additional funding right now just to pay for students and personnel and extra help and everything else. The costs are enormous. There's no question about that.
so we have a few more minutes, Brian. I'd like to get to another question, which is a bit broad. Will make you think a bit.
You're going to make me think?
Yeah, I know you can do it. Where do you see, in time, of course, when things are rebuilt to your specifications and when you get everything you need? This question is, where do you see your research going in the next 5 years? Having listened to you, I'm not sure you can predict that because you are so interested in so many things.
Where does it go? I'd say it's not more of the same. I've got all kinds of ideas in hydrology. We're moving ahead. By the way, I've done everything from tiny little MRI measurements. We've gone up to catchment scales over tens of kilometers. So to take measurements and then say what's the theory and can we describe how chemicals are flowing and how to treat them. This is still on the not on the table. This is all planned, and we'll do that. There's much more to refine with urology. I've only started, let's put it this way. I promised my son a couple of things. I said, first, he wouldn't lose his kidney. He didn't. Said, second of all, I said, I'll find a stent. I'll design a stent that's less painful than existing stents that are being used. Because he was on his hands and knees, about 85% of the population that has a ureteral stent from a week to months to forever, they suffer horribly from it. And I will never forget seeing him, excuse me, seeing the pain he was in just with these stents. We've already designed a new stent that received an award for outstanding research. We're trying to commercialize that. The next thing I'm trying to figure out is how the heck kidney stones form. Nobody knows that. I've already had in the lab just before he hit, that was all lost, but I've got the lab books on that. I've got a way forward to move that. There's more to do with lymphedema, more with gastroenterology. I was just sent a project that I've gotten involved in with what's called aortic sclerosis. That's when you get calcium deposits in the heart. They asked if I can help with that. I think I have an idea of what we can do there. I don't know where it's going to take me, but you stay open to things. You read the literature, you keep your eyes open and go from there. That's the beauty of being here.
So in the last few minutes, maybe just tell me a little bit, let's bring it to back to the whole sort of Weitzman community, because, every day you are passing fellow colleagues who have been through and are going through what you're going through there. And, I keep hearing about the resilience and the spirit. What is it like? Are you all buoying each other up, coming together?
Absolutely. Again, so anybody who had the initial shock and was somehow paralyzed, everybody's back at work. Even those in the Ullman building where everything was totally destroyed. There was nothing to save because the entire building was wiped out. They're already back in labs, rebuilding, and moving ahead. Okay, so some things have been lost forever and you can't redo them. Others will take 5 years to regenerate the molecules, whatever, or you need to use several generations of mice to breed and each time refine something. It'll take time. Other aspects of the work, we just move ahead.
Yeah, and there have been very hard things the last couple of years, but as you say, I think you would say, with your optimistic nature, you've also seen the kinds of incredible friends that the Weitzman Institute has.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So again, the Board of Governors is meeting here in a couple of months again, and again from the support from around the world came in initially and continues to come in all the time. It's very difficult. It's just the sense that there's the moral support there,
right.
And it means a tremendous amount.
Brian, I could talk to you for hours, and I hope we get to do this again, and we'll keep in touch. And I want to thank you so much for your stories about science. It's not just the science. I might not have been able to understand your equations but you tell great stories about your science, and I think that really gets our minds going, and also your enthusiasm really is infectious in the best way. So we really appreciate it. And I want to tell everybody again that we can get answers to the questions we didn't get to. So we've kept track of them, and we are going to make sure that we get those messages to everyone. So please, I'll say to all our viewers to keep an eye out for that message from Weitzman Canada. So I thank you, Brian. I'm going to send it back.
I would just add, please come and visit us. The food is good too, but please come and visit us. We have a lot of fun in the labs. We really do.
Perfect ending. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to turn it over to Susan now for some final words.
Thank you. I have to say, I'm feeling a bit verklempt. I don't know what the word is in English, but Brian, you know how we feel about you. Thank you for taking us through this roller coaster of intense emotions, and you always find a way to land us on a positive note with pride and inspiration and determination and a whole lot of goosebumps. So thank you for the joy of learning about this fascinating science. Cindy, thank you for so eloquently moderating this conversation that took us all around and back. As Cindy said, listening to Brian really epitomizes the Weitzman way. Follow your curiosity, go where it takes you, and we are right there behind you to help empower that life-changing research. And we're so appreciative with what you shared with us, both personal and professional. I also want to thank Melanie. I know she's in the audience here, and I had the privilege of having her join us for a dinner recently in Vancouver, and she told us about how she experienced what happened. So you are truly a team, and we're so grateful for both of you. And we are determined to do whatever we can to help rebuild your lab. Some of you may be wondering how you can help. We have launched the Weitzman Institute Emergency and Recovery Fund. The cost to rebuild the lab is $2.5 million, and we are committed. And I'm so privileged and grateful to be able to announce that a generous donor has already stepped up with $1 million gift. And we are so grateful. We hope that you'll consider joining with your support. Every contribution helps bring us closer to making that happen. And there are lots of ways you can do that easy on our website. Among those 18 rock stars that I mentioned, the Weitzman Canada team is our fundraising team. So Beth, Tracy, Kim, Lisa, Zoya, myself, we all are on standby waiting to hear from you. And given the discoveries that emerged from the Weitzman labs over the last 90 years, we know there's no time to waste. And reconstruction of this critical infrastructure will take years, but we will be there for that, and we want to make sure that the science continues. We'd be happy to share more details with you at any time. And as Brian said, coming up in November is a very special opportunity, now more than ever, to be together on the Weitzman campus. We talk about the brilliant technologies and treatments that come out of Weitzman labs. Here's the opportunity to experience it firsthand and share that sense of pride. So the dates are November 9th to 12th. We'll be a big group from Canada and hosting you on campus. Reach out to any of us for more details. You can even extend your trip. We have a Canadian mission focused on sustainability for 2 days after that. And of course, it includes a wine tasting. Of course, what Weitzman scientist mission wouldn't include a wine tasting? Seriously, we really hope that now more than ever, you'll consider taking this journey with us. And the most important words of gratitude are for each and every one of you who not only joined us today, but continue to join in support to empower this incredible science. Brian, I'm sending you a great big hug from right across the ocean. All of us here at Weitzman Canada are with you and grateful, and we support you. So we look forward to keeping in touch with everyone. I want to thank the entire Weitzman Canada team because, as I said at the beginning, I may be standing in front of the microphone. I am shoulder to shoulder with 18 amazing, incredible women. So we look forward to keeping in touch. Have a wonderful day, and thank you.